I was trained by Ice Scully, George Clooney, Jerry Cooney, George Clooney,
George Clooney.
George Clooney came and trained me. You got to see
I was like, oh, okay, pretty cool, nice.
Hey, George, if you're out there.
First off, congratulations with the film, guys, and also for premiering at the Venice Film Festival. I love the movie. It was great. And actually, it was one of the most interesting movies I've seen because of the way it was shot. It felt very real, almost like a documentary. And it really captured the essence and the feel of the time period. Robert, how did you decide on that style, and what was your approach to making everything feel so authentic?
For the past decade or so, I've been working in documentary as a cinematographer. I started to understand cinema through the idea of the body language of the camera. And so when I read the script that Steve Loff had written for the Featherweight, it just felt like a natural connection to sort of bring in this language of nonfiction. And when we got up to Hartford, Connecticut to begin filming, it was full of the real places that Willie Pep spent his life. And so more and more this idea of heightening the sense of things being realistic and organic came to the forefront. I mean, just our entire team, all of our cast and all of our crew put so much work into making everything genuine article.
And coming from an Italian background myself, I really connected with the cultural moments in the film, like when Willie's mother was cooking tomato sauce, or when Willie was playing bocce. I really loved that. When I was a kid, I used to play bocce all the time with my nonno and nonna, right? So it's just nice to see those cultural moments in there. James, I know you have Italian roots as well. How did your own background help you connect with Willie Pep and shape the way you portrayed him?
Well, I think once I was told by my father about Willie Pep and I started doing my my work on him, I recognized where he was from, his upbringing, uh, his culture, and just knowing that this was a man who was from the East Coast, Italian American, small in stature, had a fight for everything. Really gravitated. I gravitated to that, and obviously when we were shooting in Connecticut, it was. I grew up in Italian social clubs in New York City, so walking into these social clubs, these Italian social clubs, and everybody's playing cards, and you got someone cooking something, and you got the Italian football. I mean, soccer on the TV. I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It was
It's always
very,
a lot
very
of commotion everywhere. You go to those things.
always. So it was authentic. I mean, we went and casted actual Italians that were in social club that spoke Italian, that played bocce, and they were very helpful to me because again, I was surrounded and protected by actual people who live and breathe that culture. So it makes me look good. But it was a lot of fun. Ema, who played my mother, was cooking me lunch. I mean, she spoke Italian. She was helping me with the Italian, and she would cook me food on set, and I would just go hide it and eat it, so no one else. I didn't share with anybody. I know that sounds terrible, but I didn't. I didn't
Hey,
share
well, at
my.
least you stayed in great shape, eating all that Italian, a lot of the carbs. I mean, I'm also a skinny guy myself, so I can
Yeah,
relate. We're the lucky
yeah.
ones, eh?
It was tough getting down to 126, but I did it.
Nice, nice. Well, this movie, another interesting factor about this movie is that it reminds me a bit of Rocky and Raging Bull. First off, with Raging Bull, let's just say because of the way it was shot to this film, right? I love the black and white elements, similar time period. It had that rugged type feel, right? The way like Raging Bull had, and obviously with Rocky, I mean Rocky Balboa specifically because that was the movie where he wanted to have a comeback. Same with this movie, Willie Pep wanted to have a comeback, and in knowing that, how did you want to stand out from those iconic boxing films and make this one its own?
Those movies are legendary in the history of cinema. So to even be mentioned in conversation with films like Raging Bull and Rocky is a great honor. Me and James are both huge cinephiles, and hearing that really brings a smile to our faces. But part of the challenge of making a new boxing movie is standing back and not doing what Rocky did or not doing what Raging Bull did. And so we tried to invent more of our own language for the film. I think the documentary style helps that. And you bring up this time period in Willie's life and his career. He's a legendary fighter, but finding him on the verge of a comeback, grappling with his place in history and his idea of himself as a man and as a fighter, I think that gave us really rich ground to work with the nuance of his character and the complexities of his masculinity and his relationship with his family. Films like Raging Bull, were great influences to us, but we also had to do some work to not be so close to them.
Yeah, exactly. And the boxing scene specifically, they also felt very real, which I know it's really tough to do when you're filming a boxing film to make the punches look real and everything look authentic, right? But especially one thing I noticed is Willie Pep's famous footwork, which James, you did an excellent job, uh, really mimicking that. How did you prepare for those fight scenes? And Robert, how did you go about filming them to capture that authenticity while keeping them intense and engaging?
Well, I'll tell you what we did, what the producers did that were great is they made sure that they surrounded me with real fighters. And that makes me look good. It ups my game, and at the same time, I could build off their expertise. Um, as we know, Willie Pep's footwork was legendary, and no one like it. No one is ever going to be like that. That's what made that man so special. I was trained by Ice Scully, Jerry Cooney. So I had so many different trainers help me with his footwork, but it was very unique. It was, thank God, I have take one, take two, take three. But Robert can go more into detail of how he shot around that and how he picked his spots to illustrate Willie's mastery.
Yeah, we had very limited budget making this film. It's an indie film through and through, so we really had to think outside the box of how to recreate Madison Square Garden in the 1940s. Luckily, Willie Pep is a real guy. There's a lot of coverage of his fights, and so we were able to go back to the tape and watch what do these fights look like? How are they shot? How are they conceived? And we started to bring in this idea of trying to present them more or less in the style of newsreel from that period. And so we sort of just looked at camera positions and considered how those cameras were exposing at the time fighters on a big white canvas. So we exposed to that. That means that the audience just falls off into darkness. So we were able to film without a huge audience behind them, just a couple photographers and commentators on the side, on the skirt. And then we intercut that with real archival footage from Willie Pep's real fights. And that gives a sense of authenticity and of grandeur to the space and to the fights. And to echo what James was just saying, we had great trainers and great fight choreographers, and James and Lawrence Gilliard Jr. really physically and emotionally gave it their all to embody Willie Pep and Sandy Sadler. And I think we pull off something that feels authentic.
I totally agree. This film is really interesting because and it was something different than what I usually watch because it was shot in a documentary style, but I actually really enjoyed that. And I thought that's what gave it that charm. Did that change the way you both approach your performances compared to more traditional films, especially with moments where the camera feels more intimate or like you're breaking the fourth wall?
For me personally, I had nothing to compare it to because this was my first movie. I had done all mostly theatrical, like a tiny bit of television. So I guess that ability to sort of break the fourth wall felt a little more natural to me in the sense that I didn't have as much experience of really blocking the camera out of my periphery. But I think the thing about it that's really fun is that in every scene that you do, even if it's a two-person scene, there's always a third character in the room, and that's the filmmakers. And so the choice to either engage them in whatever it is that you're doing or to not engage them is as deliberate and specific as any acting choice that happens between you and your scene partner. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it, that third person perspective that always exists, and whether or not you want to throw it over to them can change the entire dynamic of the scene.
For me, it was the opposite, where I've been doing this for 21 or almost 22 years now, and it really messed me up when I got there. And I don't think I'd really thought about how it would be shot. And then Rob was like, oh yeah, no, interact with us. He's like, I'll have a pack of cigarettes at any given time if you need. Like at one point he was even like, you can like grab the boom mic and you can like mess with us basically. And that totally like threw me off at first. And it was a huge adjustment to get used to. I was like surprisingly nervous once I got there and realized that there was this whole other aspect that I've never done, because I've just like learned you never look at the camera, you can't even like acknowledge them. So that was really weird. And then ended up being a blast once I got used to it, but it really was not easy to adjust to for me.
Yeah, but I feel like as an actor too, like I feel like those moments where you have to kind of, as they say, jump in the deep end. I feel like that's what also helps elevate your craft, and at the end of the day, you're always learning as an actor too, right? So it's good to put yourself in those situations too, right?
Yeah, no, it was a huge learning process for me, and if I ever get the opportunity to do it again, I'm prepared now. So
nice. And
yeah.
Ruby, yeah, you mentioned this was your first movie, and it's kind of crazy because when you watch yourself in this movie, like when I watched you in it, doesn't seem like that at all. So it was a really strong performance, and I thought both of you killed it, by the way. But playing Linda, an aspiring actress trying to break through, how did you relate to her journey and bring that personal drive to your performance?
It's pretty handy dandy natural sort of synergy to that casting. I think that was something that was important to Rob, that the person that ended up playing the role of Linda not be a person who had like immediate like face recognition for the audience. And I think it really helped me because Linda's want and need in this film is so similar to like this particular moment in my career, right? She's looking at the documentary crew as her opportunity to sort of break into like pursuing her dream of becoming an actor. I'm looking at this movie in much the same way. And so it allowed me to have like a lot of tenderness and care and compassion for her as a person. And also like a real intuitive understanding, I think, of like how that feels. And there would be moments, I think, where like Rob would, have us roll in improvs. And sometimes when he was setting up a shot, he would take care to remind me, be like, as the camera's coming up, remember that this is the only thing that Linda's ever really wanted. And as he would say that to me, there was this metacognitive moment where I was like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like, because this is the only thing I've ever wanted to do in my life. So there was like a really beautiful synergy to that. And I think it was really smart casting on Rob's part. So yeah.
Yeah. And Keir, for Billy, his addiction is a big part of his struggle in the film. How did you approach the emotional and physical challenges of playing someone dealing with addiction? And were there any key moments where you really wanted the audience to feel the weight of Billy's inner battles?
Well, yeah. So going into it, I immediately, as soon as I knew I was going and the film was, actually happening, I like contacted a friend of mine who's a recovered heroin addict and who also works, sponsors and is like very active in that community. And I just, sat down with him and picked his brain for, a few hours. And, he was very adamant about, there are so many, things that you see like heroin addicts doing in movies that he just finds to be untrue and unfair. And so I wanted to really do not just him, but anyone who's struggled with heroin addiction justice. And I also, I think there's one way that that character could have been played. I mean, he is somewhat the antagonist or an antagonist in the film, but I think I really wanted to make sure that he was a fully fleshed out human, and that you do, hopefully watching the film, have sympathy for him, and realize that, he's just sick. And yeah.
Yeah. And Linda and Billy have very different ways of dealing with Willie. For example, Linda, as an aspiring actress, faces her own struggles while trying to support Willie, and Billy is more openly frustrated with him. So how did each of you approach the scenes where your character had to confront Willie, giving these different dynamics? And were there any real life moments from Willie's story that helped guide your performances in those confrontations?
I think for me, my experience playing Linda was different than Keir's experience playing Billy or Jim's experience playing Willie, because Linda is sort of an amalgamated character. She is like a combination of all of his different wives put into one. She's not like really, although there was a Linda Papaleo, she's not really one specific person. So I had like a lot more artistic and creative license there. And so I think I was sort of able to, use the text that was on the page as a jumping off point. And I think when she does find, like, there's a difference in this movie when you think about like what their relationship is. It's like not necessarily what it is the audience is seeing because they're aware of the camera being there. So in another movie, like you might see like, the version of the conversation that happens when they are completely alone, but you don't really so much get that in this film. And so I think the scenes where she confronts Willie in the latter part of the film, there is like this real desperation to her attempt to get him to wake up to how it is that he is being portrayed, and he is completely sort of blind to what other people's perception of him is. And so I think for her, she feels like she's being compassionate when she's like at her most desperate and frustrated with him. I think that that's like the lens as an actor that I was sort of viewing those altercations for. It's like you're not only blocking your own shot, but you're blocking mine because you can't get out of your own way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So for, Billy and Willie's relationship, I mean, I met the real Billy. He still lives in Hartford. We went and got breakfast, and it was interesting because, I think anyone can say subjectively, like, he was not the best father, especially at that point. He, separated Billy from his mother, which he has a lot of resentment about. He kind of, Billy lived in Willie's shadow in this town where he was this, local celebrity. And then, of course, his father's very harsh on him with his, drug issues. Doesn't really want him around, does not want him in the documentary, doesn't really want him acknowledged in that way. But meeting with Billy, even now, I mean, you talk about his dad, and you could tell he just really loves his father, and I think still holds on to this image of his father that isn't necessarily what, I would consider like a great relationship. And so we really wanted to bring that in, that like, despite Billy kind of showing up and sort of trying to sabotage this documentary, he's really trying to get his father's attention and love. He's a bit of, a little kid, like causing a temper tantrum to get some kind of attention from his dad. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. Honestly, just wanted to say congrats again for the film and continued success. I'm wishing for both of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.